percentage, I would say probably about like 20% gain in function, hearing function. I can hear some sounds, but I can't imagine using it as my only way for accessing the world or communication or education or anything like that. I definitely have never been able to hear enough to function that way, right? So we have somebody over here who can talk on the phone with his. I cannot do that with mine. So it's just different for everybody.
I'm the same. Gideon's saying I can't do that either. What about you, Guy? Oh, there's nobody over there. I guess I'm next. I was 1 when I became deaf. I had spinal meningitis. I grew up mostly in general education environments using spoken approaches, so speech programs where you get a slap on the wrist, literally, if you're signing through 1st and 2nd grade. Because of that abuse, I switched over to a different school. They used the total communication approach, sign language, and speaking simultaneously using signing exact English, which is not ASL, but an English grammatical structure using visual language. So we use the signing system with spoken language at the same time. My parents encouraged me to keep speaking, and I said, okay. I really loved the speech teacher. The speech teacher would come over and be so excited. I would have a bunch of attention. They would ask me what I was doing. We would have conversation. They would use C-sign, of course, and I would at the same time. We would have 10-minute conversations, and then they would teach me how to talk more. And so I was more assertive learning spoken English for sure. Later, maybe when I was about 23 years old, actually, let me tell you, when I was in the general education system between junior and senior year in Fremont, California, as a residential school for the deaf, that's over near San Francisco, if you don't know, which is close to the Bay Area. When I got into that program, I was flabbergasted. Everybody used American Sign Language, and I picked it up immediately. My language and educational access took off just at the last 2 years of my K-12 education, junior and senior years. From there, I started using ASL. I went on a religious mission as well. And then, as I was saying, at 23, I thought, hearing aids, don't even need them, chuck them to the hills. So I did. I decided not to use them. I was still speaking okay, not like someone who is a native hearing English speaker. Sometimes when we needed to clarify, I could do English for simple responses and conversation. I wasn't great at it, but it worked. So as I said, I got rid of my hearing aids at 23. I was still speaking. I felt okay. And then when I was about 40-something, maybe 45, I got very ill. I had FMS, which is fibromyalgia syndrome. And I was aching everywhere. I felt brain fog constantly. I was very disoriented. I was pretty laid up sick for years. My brain function fatigued significantly. It took me a lot more to process the world around me, and speech, I couldn't keep up with it anymore. My brain couldn't comprehend it. Because of that cognitive issue, I decided to sign a bit more. Signing was okay, communication in that world was okay, and what didn't bother me before, talking to hearing people, now was a hindrance. I went to a gym and went to a hot tub, and I would be able to talk to some people prior, and because of my FMS for the last 10 years, I haven't been able to do that with the hearing world. So all in all, that's why I decided to go ahead and look up cochlear implants, and I think it was the really best time, if you will, for me to get my implant, because my scar is maybe 2 inches versus something that's 6 or 7 inches around my head like it used to be, because the technology has improved and it's much more efficient now. Because of that, I went ahead and got an implant. I got the smallest and lightest one available. They just made the one that I have this year, actually. It was a simple procedure. I didn't have much pain through it at all. And anyway, that's why I had decided that I wanted to get an implant. In the last 20 days, I have met people and talked more and spoken more, and I am able to understand them better or I wasn't able to in the last few years because of my brain fog and fatigue. I feel like my eyes are working on half speed, and so are my ears, you know? So I hear something and I see something, and now with the implantation, it catches me up a bit. So in the environment, I do find that I'm responding to noises that I didn't know were available before. If I pull out a key or something like that, I don't realize, especially in an older car, how much noise that can make. So now I'm able to speak with hearing people again. I wouldn't say that it's a perfect fix by any means. I actually forgot to tell you one thing. When I'm speaking prior to the last 10 years, people would not really understand me, and I would have to repeat myself over and over thinking I was speaking okay. So I still think I'm also improving my speech over the last little bit, and it has gotten a bit better. So that's my answer.
Okay, and again, you all don't have to answer the questions all the time. If I pose a question that maybe you have something to say, please do, and if you don't, that's fine too. Again, for anybody here, after having an implant, what's your feelings about perceptions of members of the deaf community? Tell me about that. Are you afraid of how the deaf community perceives you or not? Roger here. I think currently, the way that the world is, it's not as bad, but maybe back then when these folks got theirs, that it was different. But folks have asked me, really, you got an implant? And I tell them about, my health situation. I used to historically have been pretty adamant against the use of a cochlear implant, and the phrase never say never has become very real for me lately. But I've had some people rail against it a little bit, and I certainly am understanding of the fact that they can have their opinion and we're able to have a friendship still, but I don't know what it would have been like for these guys here. I don't know if it was different in Utah or in California, but that's my experience.
So to add on top of what Roger just said, I feel like, from my perspective, that the debate on cochlear implants within the deaf community has changed dramatically over the years, especially the last 10 years, I would say. My first cochlear implant was in 2004. I was heavily involved in the deaf community back then. I did feel shunned at the time, as some of my friends, when I made the decision to get a cochlear implant. It wasn't like terrible shunning, but I just felt like a little differency with my friends in the community. But over the years, those same friends have kind of changed their views as well, and so it's just very interesting how things have changed over the years. That's just my perspective. So I did care about how people in the community perceived me when I first got my implant in 2004. I don't care now. So I think it's something that it's very personal to everybody. They just need to decide what works best for them in their own lives, rather than what other people think about them.
I would love to add something. I think it's important to understand the bigger picture. The reason I mention that is, how many of you actually know about language plasticity with the brain from 0 to 5? Can you raise your hand if you've heard that before? Okay, great. So I think that a lot of deaf people in the community are concerned because when a baby is born, right now the standard practice is to implant an infant. Often that then means that they're not included in the deaf community, they're not acquiring sign language, they're hindered from using sign language, and the deaf community is concerned about that because when you implant deaf and hard of hearing children, they then have language deprivation without access to ASL. So the deaf community is concerned in my purview, and I am noticing the deaf community as well feeling very proud of the community. So if somebody gets an implant, the chances of them being in the community are lesser. We want people to be proud of being deaf, to be a part of the rich culture. And when deaf people understand that there's a lot less judgment and we care more about language skill and effectiveness, like can you sign, can you be in both communities, I think that's what's important. If we can understand that, then I don't think that we would care so much about judgments. We can educate others. I think that's the most important, in my opinion.
Michael here. I think along those same lines, some great points have been raised by my fellow panelists here. When I think about, do I know who I am? When I think about that question, am I safe in the world to be Michael? And if I can be deaf, and I can be Michael and be safe, that's great. If I can wear an implant to do that and be safe to be myself, that's great. If I'm in a place, though, or an environment where I feel compelled to be or act a certain way, I feel like I'm betraying my true self. And I think that is more important, my personal identity experience, rather than a piece of plastic on the side of my head or a piece of metal inside my head. And so if the choice is made because I choose it, I find myself happier. If the choice is made by another on my behalf and a conversation isn't engaged in, my needs are not considered, I think that is more of a shunning experience in the deaf community. It's not an autonomous experience for me. And I think that's what is important about my experience. So I think it's important to distinguish between motives, right? So Johnny kind of talked about, in his opening introduction, cochlear implants being used as a cure. And if we only see one approach to introducing access to deaf folks, and we disregard other approaches and other pieces of the human experience, that's an issue. If we look at the formative identity experience of children and of individuals, and we afford them choices, I think that's really what it's about. I don't know that I really care about anything other than that, right? But until that choice is really given and embraced, it's hard to understand the world and what's really going on behind the scenes.
Great, thank you. Can you tell me if you feel like you have any positive, specific benefits from your cochlear implants?
Like I said earlier, there's like a before and after. My implants have been absolutely transformative in my life. Absolutely transformative. I'm used to talking with CEOs and stakeholders and marketing teams doing conference calls. Just complicated calls, like dealing with people from India with accents. So there's no way in hell that I could do that without my implants. Absolutely no way. I take my implants off with my family. They know, oh, Dad doesn't have his implants on, and so they sign to me. And when I have my implants on, they know I have my implants on. So for me, it's been transformative in ways that I didn't expect. Just want to add to what everybody said. I agree that it's not a cure, but at the same time, I think it's the wrong approach to try to compare it to a hearing person. To me, it's about functionality and utility. I don't care that I don't hear like you do. That's not the point. We have separate lives, separate bodies, separate ear systems. The point is, can it functionally help me to do the things I want to in life? Can it help me to do the conference call with the India team? Can it help me to talk on the cell phone and get that $700 cell phone bill? You know what I mean? So, I used to see the world as black and white. It's not. It's grays and grays and grays. It's different shades of gray. Like Shad said, there is no right or wrong answer here. Like, this is a very personal experience. I'm not going to say implant everybody. You know what I mean? That's death. I don't believe in that. It's a very personal experience. Like Roger has has a very personal experience with that that I don't have, and that's okay. Some other people have had bad experiences with cochlear implant technology, and they don't like it, and they don't want anything to do with it. That's okay. That's their experience. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has their own experiences in life. So that's kind of the approach I look at it. I used to be very black and white, like, cochlear implants, it's amazing. Most people should get it. I don't share that, but at the same time, I think it's amazing, and anybody that thinks they can benefit from it, based on the information that they have, I don't think that we should interfere with that or accept it. So, yeah, very, very transformative for me, and that's just my personal experience. So.
This is Roger. I'm glad that you said that because I want to tack onto it. So if you look at YouTube, my experience when I turn on my cochlear implant, there are some people who say certain things, and there's one deaf man who said, "I'm proud to be deaf." As I kept searching, I found some other information. I decided to look on the threads and the comments. I said, "Me too. I'm proud to be deaf." And there's people who don't want cochlear implants, and I think that's great. I had health issues, so for me, I wanted that, and that's also great. And when he responded to my comment, he accepted that. So I do agree that we all have our individual experiences, choices, just like you said. I agree with that.
Some positive things for me in terms of an implant, I think it comes down to speech for me. And if you remember, my mom and I, we would practice all the time. And something that I learned was that I had a hard time distinguishing specifically vowel sounds. There's sometimes just minor adjustments in how they're pronounced or how they're said. And we would do hearing tests, we would plug in a DVD, we'd practice me being able to hear and listen to dialogue, and I would do pretty good at identifying what was what if we had subtitles or captions going on, but then take away the captions and I wasn't able to understand anything. So while I was growing up, we would practice, and something that we realized is that it wasn't a fix, right? So I was able to get along with like basic sentences, how are you, have you had a good day? They were predictable, run of the mill. But I can read speech pretty well. I interact with hearing people on a regular basis. I will sign and verbalize at the same time with folks that maybe are learning sign language or are new to sign language. And in the beginning, I couldn't understand their vocalizations, and if that still happens, it's a way for them to feel compelled to learn sign language when they want to talk to me. So that's a perk in some ways, and they're forced to practice too, and I'm forced to practice. One thing another positive of having an implant is that, again, we have this recurring theme of it not being a cure. I have a friend who has told me that I think it was her parents were thinking about giving her an implant when she was young, and when the doctors looked at it, they realized that she wasn't a candidate because her deafness or her hearing loss was different. Her nerves were just totally fried and destroyed. An implant would serve her nothing. So I also want to put forward in our discussion here today that let's not. I think there's a lot of bias where we gravitate to having everybody being able to verbalize and everybody to be like the majority, which is the hearing English-speaking population. And I think select individuals will just never benefit from certain approaches, and it will likely turn out to be harmful.
This is Johnny. A pro of an implant for me is that when I was growing up, I loved listening to music, and I loved the big old headphones. I had to turn them up so loud though that other people could hear it, and I didn't like that. I wanted it to be quiet enough so that I could hear it, but they couldn't. And luckily now with the Bluetooth technology, we're wireless. With my hearing aid, when I use it, other people can still hear it because it's natural sound. It goes through the ear mold, and so you can hear it. But when I'm using my cochlear implant, it goes through the auditory nerve, and people around me can't hear it. That's my biggest pro. Sometimes I watch movies at night, and my wife wants to sleep, and she'll be like, "Hey, can you turn down the volume?" And I'm like, "Yes, I can, but I don't want to." But with my Bluetooth connector through my cochlear implant, she can't hear it, and that is the biggest perk.
Tell me about a challenge that maybe you all had when you received your implant.
I remember after I had my surgery, and then about 3 weeks later, I went in to get it turned on. And I got it turned on in about an hour and a half after all of that. Me and my dad went out to go get something to eat for lunch. And I started crying and I said, I think I made a big mistake. And so that was my initial experience. It was just beeps. It sounded like Donald Duck. I was like, what's going on here? And so after a couple of weeks, those beeps started getting interpreted by my brain as sounds. So I remember talking to my dad and saying, what's that sound? It's like a, and he said it's the grandfather clock. So it was going through those experiences where my brain identified all these different beeps as sounds. And sounds, just music sounds perfect to me. I love music. I listen to it all the time on Bluetooth. My wife doesn't come after me or anything at night, so it's just perfect. I mean, the technology has really evolved and changed over the years. It's really amazing. Bluetooth technology and all the things that they're coming up with. The implants are becoming smaller and smaller. So yeah, I think there's a period that a lot of people don't realize, especially as they get implants, that there's a period where you really have to practice with it. You have to understand that it's a process. You need to have your brain go through the process and understand what these beeps and sounds are and interpret it as sound. For me, like I mentioned earlier, I really was motivated to make this work. I was listening to a lot of audiobooks, listening to podcasts, watching videos with subtitles on them. So I was really motivated to really make this technology work. And so I think that plays a big role into the success of Cochlear Implant, if you're willing to put in the work, so to speak. It's like Johnny said, it's not a cure, but it's what you make it. It's like Mike said, it's a tool, but it's how you use the tool.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what I want to say, so I'm taking a second to formulate my thoughts. I think that's a great question, and in it I see two questions, the positives and then conversely the negatives. So if we're looking at it in a black and white frame, which I typically do, is look at the pros and the cons and the whole gamut, including the gray. There's a lot of gray there for me and many diverse answers. All that to say that when I look at my choices before me, I think it's important to first understand me. I specifically am a very religious person, I did serve a church mission for the LDS church specifically. When I finished my mission and I came back, I never thought that I would ever get a cochlear implant. I thought, that's just not in the cards for me. That's not an identity that I need. My identity is good where it is. I never thought that I would want it. So knowing that now, and that I'm a religious person, every time I go in to the temple, post-mission that is, I feel inspired to get an implant. And I kept thinking, hey guy, no, I don't want that. I went back into the temple and I looked at this guy and I said, stop it, I don't want one. And it didn't matter if I was with church or with family or whoever, I never felt that inkling to get an implant. And when I was in the temple, I felt prompted and I was like, why? Why does this keep coming up? Why? So I was like, I'm gonna rebel against you a bit. I'm gonna tell you no, but then I'm gonna get it so you'll stop prompting me. Because I wanted to be done with the prompting. And honestly, that's what it took for me. So I got an implant because of that to quiet him, if you will. There was a large part of me, I will say, that felt like I was abandoning my identity getting this surgery. I was abandoning my people, my friends, and it wasn't ever them abandoning me. I didn't ever feel any type of anything from anybody who I told I was getting an implant, but I felt like I was abandoning me. And how could I neglect myself? That might be an unfair parallel. If I talk about Mary and Joseph leaving for Egypt and leaving the people, leaving Bethlehem, leaving Jerusalem, leaving all of that to go. And my parallel is that I felt like I was leaving my people, my language. And ever since I got it, he stopped prompting me. I will tell you that. There's no more prompts to get it because I did get it. But now it's to the point, and I guess the point for me is that I needed to learn something. I needed to be more beloving. I needed to be more compassionate. I needed to be more receptive to those around me. And I think it was about all of that. What that gave me came from my cochlear implant. But back when I got those promptings, I didn't understand that. When I was 35, I didn't get it. I just had my 40th birthday. And I thought, I need to improve kindness. I need to be more loving and doting to people. So that's a positive, I will say. A negative very shortly is I get headaches chronically since surgery. My headaches have not stopped. They've not gone away. So that's a huge negative. And the other side of the story. So will I accept the lessons learned about the people and my human experience and those that I'm around? Sure. Do I have headaches? Yes, but it seems insignificant to what I've gained. I think it's important to improve kindness and how we are with other people.
For me, a challenge is societal expectations in terms of how and when I should use the implant. I remember at 5 years old, I wanted to go out to recess, but the teacher told me that I was ineligible to do so unless I wore the implant. And I felt compelled to use it, forced even, right? I heard static, and my parents would say, oh, it seems like you've been doing better. Your speech therapy teacher thinks you've been doing better. And it felt like everybody was twisting my arm to get it done. And